Hi, my name is Miah, and I have a theory. I call it Mia's theory, and it describes the existence of the universe. I'm not much of a talker, and since I've written everything down, I'm going to use a text to voice synthesizer program to explain everything, along with loads of graphics. Thank you.
If you have no knowledge in quantum mechanics, general relativity, string theory and quantum gravity, then this theory will not make sense to you. I will start off with some basic ingredients, and then I will explain how these can work together in order for our universe to exist. The ingredients are three-dimensional space, energy, motion, time, gravity, mass and matter in the form of subatomic particles. There are other factors I didn't include, like electromagnetism and nuclear forces, because they will not be required at this time, as I am trying to keep things simple. If you look at this illustration, you will see that I have arranged them in a way that they all have direct link with their neighbors. They all exist within three-dimensional space. According to the laws of general relativity, motion through space slows down time, gravity bends space-time. Space and time are two of the same thing. Think of it as two sides of the same coin. Mass is required for gravity, matter has mass. Matter and energy are two of the same thing. Think of it as two sides of the same coin. And energy is required for force carriers to move things. I will start by explaining how gravity affects space-time. How gravity can affect the rate at which time ticks. This is an important factor for explaining my theory, so listen carefully. This illustration of a black hole is to explain how time is affected by gravity according to the laws of general relativity. If there are black holes of multiple sizes, then this is the biggest it can become. It cannot get any bigger than this because it has reached its maximum mass. If you look carefully, I have added a small formula. I have given gravity a value in μg, where 100 μg will cause time to stop ticking and 0 μg will allow time to tick at its maximum rate. As you can see, I have labeled the center of the black hole as 99.99999, many more nines and ends with a 9. This is because 100 μg will cause time to stop. Everything within that region will be frozen, suspended in time. And if something is suspended in time, then it has no mass and does not occupy space, so it no longer exists. Therefore it will always have the gravity of one atom less to 100 μg. For example, if I was to feed this black hole with a solar system that has enough mass to increase the gravity by 10 μg, then everything within the region of 90 μg will become 100 μg and will cause the time to stop, so everything within that region will be suspended in time and no longer exists. Now that you are aware, having knowledge or perception of what happens when gravity is at its maximum, the point where the rate of time is 0%, shows that matter can go out of existence. Think about what could happen when gravity is at its minimum, the point where the rate of time is at its highest. This makes me wonder all the time, could matter come into existence from nothingness? If so, then how? To answer those questions, we have to look into what happens in areas where gravity is at its minimum. No, I am not talking about 0 g that you can experience out in space. The only reason that you can experience 0 g there is because you are in orbit around the Earth. Geostationary orbit. If the land beneath you doesn't move, you are constantly falling through space, giving you the effect of zero gravity where there is gravity. You will have to think about the spaces in between galaxies. They are the areas where gravity is at its minimum in our universe. In order to understand what might happen there, you first have to understand what matter, space and time is. Now things are just about to get more interesting, and a little bit more complicated, so bear with me as I explain what three-dimensional space is, and how subatomic matter can gain mass by motion through space. Three-dimensional space. In order to understand what three-dimensional space is, you will have to understand what dimensions are. Space with zero dimension means that there is no direction for anything to move. So there is no zero-dimensional space or zero-dimensional objects. Most people imagine zero dimensions as a dot. One dimension is like a line where theoretically something can move along it. However, I don't see how a one-dimensional space or objects can exist. Because it doesn't have any physical area, you cannot measure an area of an object from just a length. Space with two dimensions is like a flat surface where anything can move in any direction within the surface. Squares, circles, and triangles are two-dimensional shapes. Areas can be measured on two-dimensional objects. For example, to find the area of a square you can times length by the width. Three-dimensional space is when height is available. Now you can move in any direction in space. Cubes, spheres and pyramids are three-dimensional shapes. Areas can be measured on three-dimensional objects. For example, to find the area of cubes, its length times width times height. Anything beyond 3 dimensions is hard to imagine within our three-dimensional universe. They can only be theoretically calculated. For example, to find the area of 4-dimensional hypercube or a tesseract, you can times length by width times height times the 4th dimension. Matter can gain mass. Matter in the form of subatomic particles gain mass when you keep on adding energy to it after it has reached its maximum velocity. This happens all the time when particles are accelerated inside particle accelerators.
The proton synchrotron is 628 meters in circumference, and they circulate for 1.2 seconds, reaching over 99.9% of the velocity of light. It's here that the point of transition is reached, a point where the energy added to the protons by the pulsating electric field cannot translate into increased velocity, as they're already approaching the limiting speed of light. Instead, the added energy manifests itself as increasing mass of the protons. In short, the protons can't go faster, so they get heavier.
Now that you are aware, having knowledge or perception of how matter can gain mass and what dimensions are, things are just about to get even more interesting, and more complicated. So bear with me. Let's put this information together to explain what matter is. String theory tells us that matter is like a one-dimensional pulsating strings of energy within dimensions beyond or within the 3 dimensions of space that we can experience. The strings pulsate at different rate to give different particles different properties. I will have to disagree with the one-dimensional part. Now here's how I think of it. Our universe is a flat universe, which means that our universe has no edge or boundaries, so space will go on forever as long as there is matter, or antimatter, to occupy it. Now think of these boxes as space within space. They don't have to be boxes, they can be spheres, but I am using boxes because it's easier to explain. Each one of them boxes is big enough to hold galaxies or clusters of galaxies, and they are all accelerating away from each other, because our universe is expanding. These boxes are open in all directions, so there are no boundaries to stop matter like photons from going from one box to another. Let's call these boxes three-dimensional space, because they are three-dimensional space within space. Now when we look inside one of those boxes, you will find more boxes. This time each one of them boxes is only big enough to hold a subatomic particle. We are going to call these boxes atomic space because of their size. These boxes are closed without boundaries like a closed universe. For example, if something was to continue to move in a straight line in any direction, it will find itself back to where it started from. The best way to describe this is to go step by step from a one-dimensional space. So think of a line and join the ends together. Now if something continues to move within the line, it will always find itself back where it started from. For a two-dimensional space, think of it as a piece of paper and join all the ends together, so it will look like a sphere. Now if something was to continue to move straight in any direction within the surface, it will always find itself back to where it started from. Now for a three-dimensional space, you have to think of a cube or a sphere and join the ends together, which is as difficult to imagine as it is to imagine a hypercube or a tesseract, but the principle is the same. If something was to continue to move straight in any direction, it will always find itself back to where it started from. Now if you were to look inside our box of three-dimensional atomic space, there will be segments of energy continuously moving at the speed of light. No matter how much energy there is, it cannot go any faster than the speed of light because that will cause the time rate within itself to slow down completely, and stop ticking, so, naturally the excess energy will gain mass, and become heavy, causing a tiny amount of gravity by bending space-time. I tend to see this law as a natural fail-safe mechanism in order to prevent the collapse of time. There will be a limit to how much mass the segments of energy can gain because of the size of the atomic space they occupy. The amount of mass they have can determine what subatomic particle it can be. This ball of energy may even be rotating, depending on the speed, and the rotation may also determine what subatomic particle it may be. This ball of energy may even be pulsating at different frequencies, giving you more options on what subatomic particle it could be. Now that you have some knowledge or perception of what matter, gravity, and space-time is, we can go back to the earlier question of what could happen when gravity is at its minimum. Before I continue, ask yourself this question. Does matter occupy space or does space occupy matter? Most people will probably think of this as a silly question, but not a deep thinker like me. Think of this line as the maximum length of our subatomic space. Segments of energy will have to reach light speed for it to move from A to B in one fragment of time. Keep in mind that nothing travels faster than the speed of light because speed of light is at one fragment of time end to end of the subatomic space. If those segments of energy were to be concentrated enough for it to have mass, it will have some gravity by bending space-time. And that will cause time to slow down within the subatomic space. So even though it is moving at the speed of light, it will appear to take longer to go from A to B, giving you the effect of the distance being longer. So by slowing down the rate of time, brings more space into existence. It is the mass within matter that creates space around it. So it is actually space that occupies matter. More slowly the time ticks, more space there will be, until it slows down completely to 0% time rate, that is when excess matter and space collapses into a singularity. You don't tend to see a lot of space within black holes, that is because the gravity is so strong that all the matter within it are compressed and nothing within the event horizon can escape, so there is no way to see the space directly around it. However, the space created by it extends all the way to the outskirts of its galaxy. Keep in mind that the slower the time ticks, there will be more space, so therefore the faster the time ticks, there will be less space. To understand what happens in between galaxies, the areas where gravity is at its minimum in our universe, the point where the rate of time is at its highest, we have to go back to our line that represents the maximum length of our subatomic space. Segments of energy will have to reach light speed for it to move from A to B in one fragment of time, in order to gain mass for it to become matter. Now what if this subatomic space was to shrink and become half the size? Well, this will mean that the segments of energy can move at half the speed to move from A to B in one fragment of time and gain mass for it to become matter. If this subatomic space was to shrink again and become even smaller, the segments of energy can move at even slower speed for it to move from A to B in one fragment of time. In between galaxies where the time ticks faster, there is less space. So the subatomic space will be so small that the segments of energy don't even have to move for it to get from A to B in one fragment of time to gain mass and become a subatomic particle. Note that as soon as the segments of energy obtain mass, it has gravity and creates space. Also note that if segments of energy don't move, then it has no dimensions, so it doesn't exist, it is nothingness. And that is how matter and space can come into existence from nothingness. This means that matter in the form of subatomic particles, and space is constantly coming into existence. This may explain why the spaces in between galaxies are getting bigger. Our universe is expanding. The speed of expansion is accelerating. This may also explain why excess subatomic particles that don't collide with each other in the right order to form atoms, can be detected from Earth as cosmic rays. This Miah theory actually almost throws the Big Bang theory out of the window. I tend to imagine the Big Bang as a continuous expansion. Miah's theory. It's a new approach to explain how matter and space itself is created through the laws of physics and logic.